Hello guys, today we will be talking about cumulative charge cassette 6 and generally its history and origin. What got me to do this video is video made by Lisnik on Telegram channel Achtung Mine, and he goes very much in depth of history of this charge, so we will also touch on that. So in Soviet times there were cassette, which mean cumulative charge series, and they had numbers 4, 5, 6 and 7. Also before that, the first cassette series was cassette 1, 2, 3, which were direct copies of German World War II designs. As you can tell, standardized cumulative charges, it's mainly domain of engineering troops, so anytime when you need to ruin some infrastructure or do some specialized tasks, the engineering troops should provide solution for that. There is, for example, cassette 4, which is 86 kilograms heavy charge, so it's basically much bigger version of this one. And purpose of those is to ruin airfields, basically the landing zones for aircraft. When placed correctly and exploded, they ruin it permanently. So this tactic was used by our side in Donetsk airport, so once the fighting started there and it was clear after some time that there will be no saving of the airport, under the cover of the fog, a car arrived, placed a bunch of the cassette 486 kilograms charges and basically explode them on the stripe. So then you can even see it in footage, the huge holes made precisely by the cassette series of charges. So not only airfields but also all kinds of machinery and all kinds of pipes that might be just for oil, for gas or even for water. You can ruin those with the cassette series. But this cassette 6 example, it's actually much smaller than the standardized charges that are most commonly used. So now let's talk a little bit closer about cassette 6. So this design was created in 1966. And you would never guess its original purpose, because its original purpose was in case of the World War III. Part of the strategy of the West during the Cold War was placement of nuclear minefields. So you can imagine that as pre-made holes out of concrete. Where is nuclear charge? Of course, you have also some network of cables, and those should be exploded once the Eastern Bloc would start moving. You can imagine the huge tank armies moving, for example, through Bavaria. Those nuclear minefields should be detonated. This tactics was supposed to gain 48 hours to the Western forces to basically mobilize and position themselves in defense and to the counterattack. So those nuclear charges were actually placed around Germany and around the border of the Eastern Bloc. Now, how Eastern Bloc wanted to counter that? For this purpose, Soviet GRU spetsnaz detachments were created. And their task was to find the location of or the placement of the nuclear charge, send spetsnaz squad or spetsnaz force to place the charge on top of it and explode it beforehand. Precisely for this task, the cassette 6 charge was created. So now let's take a look at the construction. So on the top you can see the fuse well. So just under a little cap you basically place a detonator with a time fuse. It can be, for example, ZFS series, but also any other kind, like for example electrical one. Then you have the booster around, and then you have the main charge going like so. This is just an empty space, and this is the cumulative cavity, and also the shape of the outer body secures the necessary standoff for maximum performance of the cumulative charge. This empty space actually became a problem during the further use of the mine because of the buoyancy. So this charge, when you want to place it underwater, of course here is air, so it will have tendency to float. So for that purpose you have this outer ring that you can basically add onto the mine with use of this protruding section. And also this one helps you to stabilize the charge correctly when you're placing it vertically or, for example, on ice. Because as you can tell, it's pretty much top heavy, so it's very easy for the charge to tip over. So for that we have this outer heavy ring. Also, not only the ZFS series or the electrical detonators, also you might equip it with detonator and any of the WZ firing devices. Those are specialized firing devices that give you some extra time before the charge explodes. So we have, for example, WW3, 6, 144, the numbers referring to the hours of delay before the charge explodes. The explosive filling is 1.8 kilograms of TG40, which is mixture of trottyl and hexogen. As you can tell by the shape of the cumulative cavity, this charge was not designed for maximum armor penetration. The main purpose was to beat the armor, maximum of 50 millimeters of it, and then do extensive damage under the cover. So you can imagine the nuclear charge being under some metal or concrete cover, this being placed on top, exploded, penetrated the thin cover of the charge, and then do some extensive damage in it. Also, the nuclear charges are actually quite complex devices, so although you might get some zone that is radioactive after the explosion, of course, you will actually not make the nuclear charge go off as it's intended if you use a device like so. So that's why the GRU troops were supposed to reach those, explode them, by that move deactivate them pretty much, and then the tank armies can basically move safely through the area. Also, the task of destroying the nuclear mines was later moved from the GRU to the tank armies themselves. So inside these tank armies there were dedicated detachments under the engineering troops that were supposed to do this type of work instead of the spetsnaz. Now we're getting to the second purpose of the KZ-6 charge. The intended purpose was to help to destroy the ballistic missile warheads, the nuclear charges on them. So we can imagine a scenario where, for example, Pershing II ballistic missile and also the vehicle would be ambushed or seized by element of the GRU spetsnaz. Then this charge would be placed on the warhead and exploded. But also there is second use, and that's on the Soviet, post-Soviet Scud missile. The Scud system is just a NATO name for it. In the Soviet nomenclature it's called 8K14 Elbrus. So now when we're talking about the Soviet Elbrus system, the main concern of the generals was that the warhead, the nuclear warheads and the entire system could be potentially seized by the enemy in case of the conflict. So for that they actually marked specialized spot on the warhead of the Elbrus system, and the specialized spot was dedicated for placement of the KZ-6. So also there was KZ-6 charge placed in the cabin of the troops, and in case that the vehicle would become immobile or whatever, come under ambush and there would be danger of the system being seized, the commander was supposed to take the charge, place it on the warhead and detonate it that way. Over the time, the use cases for the KZ-6 became less and less relevant. So over time, it basically became just another standardized charge, mainly used for destruction of the unexploded ordnance. But for this purpose, it's actually quite big and quite cumbersome, because you can achieve the same or better results with much smaller charges. But what made it very much relevant again was the use in the drones, the attack drones, especially the fixed wings ones. For example, the KZ-6 is actually standardized charge for the Lancet Russian drones that are extremely successful design, and they really causing a lot of problems. Also, it's one of the reasons why the Lancet don't have very good results against tanks, because the tanks are very much up-armored, plus some extra protection in form of the ERA armor or the NOSH. But all other types of vehicles like BMPs, BTRs and especially self-propelled howitzers, the Lancet is very dangerous. Also, we have further generations of Lancets that actually abandoned the use of KZ-6 and used more capable warhead. From our side, we use those on drones that attacking refineries. So this charge is pretty much capable to penetrate the outer shell of the tanks with the gasoline or with the diesel, and still there is plenty of energy after that to set it ablaze. One more use that seems relevant to me is use against blindages, because the weight of the charge is only 3 kilograms. So it's relatively easy to take it in your backpack with 50-second ZTP, and in case that you during fighting in trenches or approaching enemy position, you getting some resistance from inside the hideout, inside the bunker, but you actually can get on top of them, because usually there is only 1 or 2 layers of logs and some dirt on top. And in this scenario, instead of trying to reach the guys inside by hand grenades, because also there are the false walls or, for example, anti-grenade pits just on the entrances of the blindages, you can place one of those on top and it will basically beat through the knockout through the logs and still have plenty energy to create overpressure inside. So now just a little bit more data. I already mentioned the weight of the charge is 3 kilograms. With the outer ring that helping it to stabilize it, it's 4.8 kilograms. The diameter is 112 millimeters and the height 292 millimeters. It can set off warhead that have maximum 15 millimeters thick metal outer jacket from the distance of 1 meter. Or it can beat 30 millimeter of armor that is under 25 millimeter of soil. When we detonate the KZ-6 on top of frozen ground, we getting a channel 0.8 meters long with diameter no less than 5 centimeters. Also, it can be used in water. Also, it can be used when we destroying machinery, in this case tank, and the KZ-6 is placed just on top of the motor. Here we can see how those are delivered to troops in a crate. 8 pieces of KZ-6 in one crate. Then 2 pieces of the outer metal stabilization ring. This is a tool for very specific purpose, but what it's supposed to do, it does very well. So thank you very much guys for watching and see you in the next video. If you wish to support us, you can do so through the PayPal link down below or become YouTube member for extra videos.